It is a milestone episode. It's episode 20 of Hail Xal'atath. And welcome, Manny. It's so good to see you. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well. I had so much fun on our last talk. I'm like, dang it, 2 weeks until we get to chat again. But here we are. We're talking again. I am happy for it. How are you?
I am good. I'm feeling very slightly overwhelmed because there's a lot of news to be catching up with at the moment.
Yeah, I don't know what to do with my day. I'm like, I should be on the PTR. I should be on live. What do I have to do over here? It is insane. It's a great time to be a content creator. It's very weird because, like, you know, we just got the release of the Legacy of Arathor 11.1.7. That's what we're going to be talking about today. But then the very next day, they opened the floodgates and start talking about 11.2 and where we're going in the future. And so, like, it almost feels like what I'm doing on live has been overshadowed or feels less important. But I need that in order to get ready for what's coming. So here we are.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I always check Wowhead every day and make sure that I'm keeping up with whatever they've posted, you know. I always check all the news. And like for the last 2 weeks or so, Wowhead has been maybe 2-3 posts a day. And then all of a sudden, on the same day that I've got to play through all the new quests from 11.1.7, I've got a Wowhead and it's like 2 pages worth of news already.
Okay, I'm going to give a criticism. You've got connections at Wowhead. Like, you know, you say 2-3 articles a day, and then today they had, or not today, yesterday rather, they had like 2-3, maybe 6 articles about the same interview. And I'm just,
Yes, and they started posting the articles without posting the interview. Like the first article that I saw didn't have, it just referenced the interview. But I'm like, okay, but where's this interview? But it's all fair. You know, writers gotta eat, I understand it. Also,
writers gotta eat for sure.
It does help to break it up like that because people are often not always interested in the whole interview. They're just interested in, you know, this or that. So it does make sense.
Oh, I mean, like, my criticism would be throw out the interview and then the articles are like deeper dives into like particular parts. Right? But like, I think that like, okay, it works with the interview because the interview was a Wowhead exclusive, right? It's a lot harder when you're trying to get the news in a timely fashion. So when something breaks, you gotta cover it, of course, right? But if you've got an interview like this, and there was many interviews that were there, and they were all under an embargo, so people had time to set this up, I genuinely think it would have been a great service to the community to have the initial interview in its entirety, and then have, because Wowhead has an access to a network of very intelligent authorities on various subject matters, go through it with them, and then have those articles hit would have been amazing. It almost preempts what you know was going to happen, which is everybody, all us creators, including myself, going through the article and then being like, here's what this really means.
Yes, but we're all going to do that anyway, let's be fair.
Yes.
As I said, writers got to eat.
But before we get all distracted with 11.2 and all of that, let's talk about what's currently in front of us, what's currently on the table, which is 11.1.7, the Legacy of Arathor, and the wonderful, generally wonderful bit of questing that we got with the release of this patch.
Yes. So my favorite thing about this patch so far has got to be the lore walking. But I really like the main questline, the Legacy of Arathor questline. I've seen some complaints about it that I'm not sure I agree with this time. It's something that I would usually agree with, but I don't know. Maybe a bit with this time.
Okay. Now I have criticisms myself, but I haven't seen much of the WoW verse criticisms of it. I wonder if they fell into the same criticisms that I did. What was the criticism that you didn't share?
Well, I say I didn't share it. I just want to go into it a bit further. The criticism is that it doesn't make sense that Danath Trollbane and the people are the people of the Arathi Highlands, so the humans but also the orcs of Hammerfall, doesn't make sense that they're all friendly towards each other, especially Danath. That's the one thing where I'm like, okay, I think people have a point. We haven't really seen Danath Trollbane become this person who is against war with the Horde, who's open-minded towards the orcs. Like, there's very little reason for him to be. He knows the orcs from the Second War, when it was the first Horde, and it was just the terrible Horde, the bloodlust Horde, the Horde that had to be put in internment camps. That was his experience, and then he went through the Dark Portal and he dealt with the Horde on Outland, and none of it was good. There's no point where he's had this good relationship with orcs. I mean, he was around the same time as Turallion, only being able to accept that the light still exists once he realized, well, the orcs don't come from Azeroth, so as far as he's concerned, it's fine if the light doesn't touch them because they're monsters. That was the attitude that these people had. So it's a bit weird that Danath is like very pro-peace now, and like he's not the one that's doing what Marin is doing, which is trying to bring back the old Alliance versus Horde conflicts, because you'd think he'd be like right bang alongside that particular attitude, What I disagree with is people saying, oh, it's more conflict, it's more happy-go-lucky, there's no conflict, everything's fine now, everyone's happy, everyone's at peace, World of Warcraft, blah, blah, blah. Whereas I feel like this questline very clearly showed that the so-called peace between the Alliance and Horde isn't going to be able to last, and is flawed and has a lot of problems, and that a lot of people, like there's a lot of tensions brewing that are going to bubble over. I mean, people who think the story ends with, oh, don't worry, everything's fine now, I'm just wondering if they played the same questline that I did. So what were your criticisms?
Oh, okay. Well, I got to first comment on the criticisms that you've put forward. I think that it's a matter of them not showing Danath's progress. Like, the Burning Crusade is ages ago, and there's time for him to change. And there have been some quests, as you've been dealing with the Stromic people, which has like somewhat pushed them one way or another. You've had things that are like when the Death Knights go to Stromgarde, and they're just there to raise Trollbane. Sorry, not to confuse. We've got a lot of Trollbanes here.
Galen,
right?
But they go to raise Thoris Trollbane.
Yes. And you get a touch on it there, right? And there's been a couple times that we've gone back, and there has been sort of a bit of a shift. But the biggest thing that that you need to deal with after, so to get to this point, is after we had the massive fight and battle that broke out in the Arathi Highlands. That was a huge thing that was recent, right, with the Fourth War. And so after the Fourth War, what happened in between there? Were there quests that were there? What moved Danath forward? And if Danath is fighting alongside everybody in the Isle of Dorn, maybe having him paralleled with Guerra, or
yeah.
with, or we'll come back to that, or with like other orcs, where it's like, okay, you guys aren't the same people I've fought along so long, just to have that sort of moment to sort of show that he was moving forward. But to quickly have him jump to this, you haven't seen that progression, and I can understand why people would have that kind of concern. But it doesn't seem implausible, it just seems unjustified.
Yeah, I do agree with that, because again, like I think the last time we saw him in the game before this was, unless he was standing around in Khazar-Gar, because apparently he came with us to Khazar-Gar, but I hadn't seen him before this patch. The last time was, as you said, like Battle for Azeroth. He's in the Stromgarde Stormfront, so he goes from killing the Horde dead to being I want to joke about peace and love. He's not really peace and love. He just doesn't want to fight with them. But the way I sort of square it in my mind is, I think he's just a very obedient soldier. He's very much believes in following the orders of his, of command, and doing his duty. And when the Alliance have told you that you are currently at peace with these people, then your duty is to uphold that peace. Stromgarde has a long history with the Alliance. Sometimes they've been some of the most loyal members, and other times they've been very contentious. So from his attitude, he probably is trying to make a show of Stromgarde is part of the Alliance. We're here for the Alliance. We will do what the Alliance asks us to do. And if that means peace at the moment, then we will choose peace. And his attitude towards Marin, I mean, they don't really say it like this, but the way I read it is he's upset with her for disobeying orders more than anything else. It's not that he has, like, by the end of the questline, he has some thoughts about standing up, about the future of this peace and how it's good. But I think essentially for him, it's just about being a good soldier. But I have to say, I love how, have you noticed how the Sons of Lothar all have the same basic problem? Whereas they're not capable of hanging around and doing their duty at home. They can't do it. Like Danath, well, he was in Outland. He went on and on about Stromgarde. He wants to go back to Stromgarde, bring it back to its former glory. He goes back. He fights for it. That's all very nice. He's there for like a bit, and then he's off fighting another war left behind in Marin's hand. And then he goes home to like sort her out because she's caused trouble. And then he leaves again, leaving her behind again to cause more trouble. Like, he clearly doesn't want to stay in Stromgarde. He's got hot feet that just, he has to be on the move. He has to be part of the war. And like, Alaria is exactly the same. Khadgar's exactly the same. Maybe not Turalian so much, but like, and then Farron Lothar herself is exactly the same. None of these people can stay put. They have to go and fight in whatever war's going on.
Well, Farron I like because for her it's where her calling takes her, right? And that was like really shown well in the supplementary story. So I like that. Lothar, you mentioned that like when he was in BC, he was always like, oh, I'm gonna return it to its former glory, and like I can't wait to get back to my homeland and the greatness that it has and the potential. And then in this, he's sort of like, nah, that's just the wall. Don't get caught up in that. You like that's how people get stupid. And it's like, where did that switch happen?
Yeah. That's the thing is he doesn't really look. It's not like he's ever been an incredibly deep character, but it doesn't feel like he does feel like he's had a personality change, even though it wasn't exactly a very strong personality to begin with. It still feels like it's changed. And I do think that they failed to get us there. And I think maybe at the end of the day, they decided it's not worth the time commitment because most people don't even know who he is. So it doesn't really matter. You just introduce him to people, tell them this is how he is. And if he does seem different, that can be explained by a lot has happened in the intervening years, I guess. I do think it's a bit of a pity that we haven't gotten more character development for him.
I think that one thing that, like, if you're not going to develop that character, you could have just left him where he was and in transit, and then had Marin be like the forward thinker, because then you don't have to explain the change. It's just like, no, he's always been like that. He's like, it just. He's not the hero anymore. It served well when he was a good soldier fighting the fight, but when he comes home and those aren't your enemies anymore, he doesn't know how to lay down his sword. That's such an easy archetype to understand that you don't have to explain it. Anyways,
I do feel like that would be a problem because Marin is such a great villain. I love this introduction of a villain so much. I absolutely do not think we've seen the last of her. I think it's very funny that at the end of the questline, Xal'atath is like, no, don't make a martyr out of her. That would be bad. And he's making a really stupid decision for the future of World of Warcraft. For the future of Azeroth, but he's made a really great decision for the future of the story because he's given us a proper villain for later on.
So, oh man, okay.
Okay.
Because you've talked about that. The fact that the Marin has brought together the Defias, right? Has brought the Defias in with the remnants of the Scarlet Crusade, and again with the why am I forgetting the assassin? The Rogue Guild. Why am I forgetting them?
I'm afraid I don't. I'm also.
There's 3 factions they brought together. It was the Scarlet Crusade, the Defias, and
I keep thinking Red Dawn, but that's the new name of the new. Oh, yes. Yeah.
Hopefully, some of you in chat will mind us.
Ooh, there's a lot of chat.
But, anyways, brings them all together. These previously, separate factions that in many ways are very much like the human problems, and then brings them together in a very xenophobic, nationalistic way, where it's like, we're gonna make a nation that is solely for humans, for the benefit of humans, for literally, they say, to the exclusion of everyone else. And they don't just mean like the Horde and their savage races and so forth. They mean like, yeah, they mean like, screw the elves, screw the dwarves. Like, they didn't say the gnomes, but I'm sure they were. They think that
they think the gnomes as well. That's not even a question.
Yeah. Not even a question. They just mentioned 2, but it's everybody else, right? So, they're a supremacist group, and wow, I didn't expect World of Warcraft to go there, but we're here, and the fact that she has been left to go about her business. She's in exile from the kingdom.
Yeah.
Where will she go?
That's gonna work.
Yeah. She's obviously gonna try and find like-minded people.
And she will find them as well.
Oh yes. And what's another group that has like a lot of fear towards outside civilizations? but has a lot of love for the Arathi heritage, of course, it's the Arathi Empire. I submit to you, the chat, and to you, my wonderful co-host, that we will not be the first to cross the storm and go over to the Arathi Empire. And the reason that the Arathi Empire will be so against not just the Horde, but the Alliance when our heroes eventually get there, is because the Red Dawn will get there first and spin their tale of how bad the Horde is and how corrupt the Alliance is, and turn them against us before we set foot on that land.
I definitely think we're going to see a sort of alliance between the Red Dawn, and thank you to chat. The missing group was the Syndicate.
Thank you.
I definitely think we'll see the Red Dawn and the Arathi team up. Something that I think is very likely to happen is I think Marin Trollbane is going to end up being a bit of a Gul'dan character, in that she will be part of the catalyst as to why we face the Arathi Emperor in the first place, but he's going to end up killing her. I think she's going to end up being killed by them, not by us. Partly because the Arathi are part Elven. Like, she even says to Farron, you know, we'll basically put up with you anyway because you are Arathi, but we're not chill about this Elven thing. Like, she's got that attitude, and I think that part of her in particular is she's very short-sighted, and I think that's going to end up biting her, and she's going to end up being betrayed by her own so-called allies because of it. I still think that the Arathi will be our enemies, but I think they'll also kill her, just because, you know, I just don't see her. Like, she screams someone who gets killed by her own allies to me.
I could see it. I could also see it being like flipped on it, where it's like actually the Arathi are like, yeah, no, like you are Arathi, but like we've evolved since then, and like us being half elf, half human is like the actual superior. So she gets out bigoted,
yeah,
and then killed.
Yeah, that's what I'm seeing. Is like she thinks she's the superior, and like the Arathi are going to be like, please, man, you're just a stupid human from the east, you know? It's us, the Arathi Empire, the men of Numenor, because that's basically what they are, let's be honest. In fact, actually, that raises a question. Do you think the Arathi are longer lived than normal humans because of their elvish ancestry?
Man. So here's where, like, my tinfoil hat becomes very pragmatic. I love exploring possibilities, but, like, when you are in, like, blind speculation, in my mind, it is a Schrodinger's cat. They could be longer lived if it so fits the story that Blizzard wants to tell. So, like, I think there's nothing to say that they can't. I just think that there's no reason to, like, speculate on it. Like, in my mind, I would like that because, like, it makes sense that, like, at least they're, like, let's say elves, like, well, Sylvanas is a bad example because she's undead, but, like, the other Windrunner sisters, right? They're longer lived, and so are all the Blood Elves, and as far as we know, the Void Elves. So some of that should pass down to, like, their descendants. Like, but, like, you could immediately say, oh no, the human genetics are too long and they die just as fast as humans.
Can I just interrupt you quick? There seems to be a problem with our stream here.
Oh no.
You sound very distant. And your camera has cut out. Sorry about this. I wonder if this is on my end or your end or... Yeah, no, I've just got a thing saying, please run. Oh, and you've gone. Sorry,
Yeah,
chat.
I'm changing something around.
Oh, that sounds a bit better. Let me just look at these. We've got quite a lot of messages in chat. Let me just read some of them. Void Elf Demon Hunters becoming a thing. Xal'atath on our side. Dimensius is furious with her and wants to kill her. So what did she want to do with Azeroth if not summon Dimensius? I have a theory about that. I think she wants Azeroth to become something like Dimensius. There you go. You're back.
Yep, I switched some things around. I've also changed up the gain on my camera. My mic. So hopefully this is better. Chat, let me know.
That is better. You definitely sound better. I think everything is okay with the stream again. Fair in seeing an old crumbling 2D model wall. Wow, that's the most magnificent thing ever. Yeah, it is a bit like that. Although, I have to say, I was running through the Arathi Highlands on Classic because I needed some footage. I wanted to go find Galen while he was still alive. And, you know, so I don't play Classic. So I went and made a dwarf and ran a level 1 dwarf through the zones. You know, the corpse run thing where you run a bit and then you get one shot, you die, and you run to your body and you resurrect and you get one shot and you die. I did that to get to the Arathi Highlands. And I had to say, me, the person who always complains and always disagrees with everyone who says, oh, things must be slow and inconvenient for you to explore. I had to say, running into the Arathi Highlands on foot in Classic, it's so grand and so mind-blowing. First, you run over this giant bridge that I don't think I've ever seen before because I'm not Alliance. So, I mean, I've played Alliance, but, you know, I haven't really paid a lot of attention to some of those lower level zones. And then you're running through the Highlands and there's these stone monuments everywhere. And then you get to Stromgarde and you see the giant wall. And it's very grand and very cool. So I have to admit that is true. Classic is pretty cool in that way.
Oh, yeah.
So from that perspective, I can see what Farron's response came from. She must have walked there.
I think that with like Farron looking at it and being like, oh, the stories that I've told and stuff, like it didn't matter exactly what it looked like. It's the image that it conjures. Like, my goodness, this wall is still standing all these years and like decades from like this time of lore that I've read all these stories about, and like and at that point, like your mind just goes wild. Maybe I can find where this story was told and where this person did this amazing event and stuff. And like at that point, are you looking at the wall, or is that wall just conjuring so much for you? And so, like, I love that Farron is almost a player surrogate in that way, because that's the exact same feeling that you get when you, like, initially come across these, like, magnificent zones as a player. As you, like, come across, like, this grandiose castle, or you come across this, like, new field. I remember when I was just a little boy and I first played the World of Warcraft, and, like, the first time I left the Barrens into Ashenvale Forest, I was like, my goodness, look at all of this. And I go there now and it's just like, man, this is low body and everything. But like, Farron kind of reminded me of that.
Well, you know, Farron, she was raised very uniquely because she was the only one of her age who was part of that expedition, because she wasn't supposed to be part of the expedition. She snuck aboard. And then Noble always laughs about it. Instead of just putting her with some family, they built a whole orphanage for her to be in all by herself. Like, why? And I mean, if you also combine that with the new short story, she's like preparing to leave Xal'atath, and she's worried that people are going to say no, Farah, no, we need you here, and instead everyone is like, Farron, leaving Xal'atath is a brilliant idea. We support you so much. And I'm like, do the Arathi just really hate Farron?
She should have like abandonment issues, and they're like, nah, child, go.
But she's also, she would be the only person her age, because either people are much older than her or much younger, which to me, first of all, it explains why her and Anduin got so close so quickly. But secondly, as a former homeschooled child myself, I think that screams homeschooled energy, and I really think they should lean into that with her as a character as well.
What's homeschool energy? Tell me about homeschool
Someone
energy.
who didn't get raised with their peers, but got raised with people who are either much older or much younger than them. Oh my word, I'm visiting Stromgarde, and it's still the decrepit version, even though I finished the quest line. I was kind of hoping they'd update that. I wonder if changing the timeline will fix that.
I'm still shocked that the orcs went to Hammerfall instead of like keeping what is it? Agarond? I forget what the name of this citadel is, but the much better built, way more defensible / more modern technology and polygons town they deserted and like went off to the east side just to be like, we need as much space away from the humans as possible. And I'm like, and that's a statement in and of itself.
Apparently, they chose Hammerfall because the Arathi Highlands reminds them so much of Nagrand. And that does check out. It is very similar to Nagrand. Oh, I'm going to get killed here. So, do you have any more thoughts about Legacy of Arathor, or should we go into 11.2? Because I know everyone's very keen on that.
Okay, I do have concerns about the Legacy of Arathor. This was a story that was so centered on this sort of like xenophobic, blame others for the problems, this like regressive look to the past, and we can make ourselves great again if we can only reclaim that past glory. And I know that hits on a lot of themes that are big right now in real life, but what I thought was really, there was two things that were really poorly handled. One was like just flat out when they're recounting the creation of the Defias, it was the most like washed version of history, like sanitized version of history. They're like, oh, the Defias, they got angry because they weren't paid, and then there was riots, and the queen accidentally got hit and killed, and so they were exiled. Right? It's just sort of like, huh. The nobles, they didn't just get paid. The nobles conspired to say, no, none of us are paying you. And it's not like the nobles are lacking money. And then there was the riots. And then the queen got killed. And then rather than understand the anger, they were exiled because the king threw what was essentially a hissy fit. And to like completely wash over how wrong they were was one thing. But then also to defend it by saying, well, you know, sometimes things don't go your way, but that's not a reason to like go into chaos and disobey the rule of law. It's like, wait a second. Who broke the law first? Them? Or the guys who said, yeah, we're not paying you. Congratulations for your slave labor. Right? Like, that really just was like a, whoa, wait a second. That ain't right moment for me. And the other part is that there's such an unequal treatment across this one story. When you're dealing with the sympathizers of Marin, the Red Dawn, I guess Red Dawn sympathizers, right? Unless you are really geared, because it can happen, you don't kill them. You slap them around and they go, oh, I've learned my lesson, they go home. And then you find out that like the guy who's been spreading the propaganda is actually really deep in all of the camps, and even sent some syndicate members to die to piss off the trolls so that the trolls would attack. And so the trolls are actually victims in here. They're being provoked into a proxy war. But there is literally no concern for them. It's just like, yeah, go kill 15 of them so they know their place. What? To me, it's just sort of like, I think when you were writing this story, you had a story in mind, and then you didn't think about all of the stories that, all of the messages and cross signals that you were sending in this story. So, they went into it, and then they made some of the problems, the same problems that Blizzard always does. And when they made changes and were like, okay, we're not going to do this, they didn't apply that across the board. And it hits harder because trolls have always been one of the races that are such a racially coded faction. And to have them be wholesale slaughtered because they decided that even though they were being attacked that they shouldn't strike back, to have them play up the cannibalism to the nth degree in the short period of time. Right? It struck me as poor, and I wish Blizzard would just come on. And they have the orcs, the Magcar orcs, and the orcs of Hammerfall actually being quite good in this story for the most part. They take in what they believe to be refugees. They defend people who are being attacked regardless of their creed and stuff. And so it shows that the tension is very much a figment of the imagination, or really just a ploy to encourage this hatred so that they can seize power. And I thought that was done well. So overall, I'm going to say good on the story, but man, there's some real bad shortfallings. And I'm saying this on June 20th. We're one day separated from Juneteenth. It just feels, oops, you dropped this on the 17th. Maybe this should have been obviously they're dealing with it months and stuff in advance, but that sucks.
I definitely agree with the trolls, especially. I was like, these poor trolls, they're just trying to live their life. I mean, I recognize that there's this history of conflict with those Witherback, because I don't know how many times I've been sent in there to fight them. So they consider it just fair play. But I mean, they'd done nothing wrong in this particular case. They were just trying to live, and they were as much having tensions being caused for them as the Hammerfall orcs. But we get told, we must make sure not to harm the orcs, but we can still go slaughter the trolls. And I am worried about Midnight, especially. As you say, the trolls have been very badly treated. One of the classic examples is Quel'Thalas was built on top of troll land. They just moved in and took it. And the trolls have been annoyed ever since, and for good reason. And I would like to at least see that addressed in Midnight. Yes, the trolls have committed atrocities against the people of Quel'Thalas, but they also had their land just pretty much stolen from them. So it's a tricky... The problem with World of Warcraft is, and they really have gone, they've just dived into the deep end with this particular questline, because as you say, it's not subtle at all. They talk about human supremacy. Everyone is fully aware of what this is referencing and what real life politics these Red Dawn people are referencing. But their storytelling isn't always elegant enough to handle these more tricky subjects with grace and to handle them properly. And the examples you're giving now is like a really good example, because I bet you anything that didn't even occur to them, this sort of problem with the way you treat the human civilians of Stromgarde versus the Witherback trolls. And the way that the trolls are portrayed in this questline as well. I imagine they probably didn't even think of it, because if they had, they might have made a few changes. So it is going to be interesting to see where they go with it going forward. I am still happy to see them like try with this storyline, because it's bringing some much needed conflict back into World of Warcraft, and it's playing on something that's there. It's not something that's come out of the blue. The human supremacy elements amongst the Alliance has always been there. It's in Warcraft 3. It's a major part of the storyline with Sylvanas. And in fact, Lothar Turan. In fact, you know, we're so used to seeing elves as sort of like proto-humans, you know, like people see sort of elves as pretty humans. I think the two most played races in World of Warcraft are elves and humans. And we're so used to that, we sort of forget that actually the elves have a very difficult history with the humans of the Alliance specifically. That is why the Blood Elves are part of the Horde, because of the bigotry that they faced from the Alliance. And Lothamar's, all of Lothamar's history with the Naga and all of that came from, and the reason why the Blood Elves are in the Horde now, that is all based on those roots. And we haven't seen that side of the Alliance spoken about like for a really long time, and I felt like it's being glossed over. Like there's for a very long time, the Alliance were the good guys and the Hordes were the cartoon villains, and that's not the story that I was introduced to in Warcraft 3. You know, I remember the Alliance having these elements, these problematic elements to them, and you know, the reason why the Horde appealed to people was not because the Horde are strong. Like that was not the story I was sold. So I always found like BFA in particular like really jarring, because it's such a different perspective of both those factions. I'm really happy to see that side of the Alliance getting explored. And again, I think it will be a case of, it won't be the Alliance that people are playing, but it will be people we recognize. So the Arathi and Marin and her people. But I do, as you say, I hope that they go into these things a little bit better. What you were saying about the device is particularly interesting, because I knew there was something off about how they dealt with the device, but I couldn't put my finger on it, because I was like, the thing is, we know that the device have kind of split down the middle now, because there were the device who followed. You know, they were just hard done by working people who had joined the revolution because of corruption from the nobles. But there were also defiers who were just in it to rob and steal and pillage. And those two sides of the defiers was like something that some of the more recent questlines have tried to grapple with. But was it the human heritage questline where the so-called good defiers, they end up starting like a soup kitchen? So now their defiers brotherhood are like, they just help the local people. They call it the Bread Makers Guild, I think. But then the faction of defiers who didn't represent that, I guess, joined the Red Dawn. And my problem is neither of them properly represent the defiers, because what the defiers were people who had a legitimate complaint against these nobles. Stormwind, the nobles did commit a terrible crime against these people, and there wasn't really proper accountability for it. It was Nixia who had manipulated the situation, but you know, she was able to manipulate the situation. She was working with willing participants. And it would be nice to see a Defias Brotherhood who aren't necessarily super evil, you know, human supremacists want to kill anyone who isn't, you know, on their side, but who also aren't necessarily super good either, super moral. Just people who are willing to, like Robin Hood characters. People who don't think the nobles need so much money and who are willing to lie, cheat, and steal, but for morally good reasons. Sort of chaotic good characters. It would be nice to see that again represented with the Defiers.
I think there's like a lot of parts to this that I would love to see explored more. It's just really hard for them to do it when every adventure we take is taking us off to some strange new land. We don't see the stories at home. But like, yeah, the Bread Makers Guild, I'd love to see what they think of this like Red Dawn and stuff. If maybe some people got pulled away from the Bread Makers Guild to do that. If some of the people who originally said, yeah, no, I wanted to loot and pillage were like, whoa, these guys are going way too far. Much like we saw with those syndicate fellows, right? That they're like, yeah, we're going to go about and do our own thing. Or maybe, you know what? We're putting this behind us and we're going to rejoin the bread makers. They actually had the right of it. Or even try and make a life back in Stormwind because we've received this amnesty. You know what? I actually am going to try and make something of it. There's a lot of these cool small stories that I wish that in the 0.7 patches and the 0.5 patches they just added in local stories into areas where they want. But like, I guess everything really. One thing, I love the lore. Clearly, I do a podcast about lore with you, so I love the lore. But like, I understand that the lore often serves whatever the focus is of the late game. And so, these side stories, these local stories being introduced into old world zones doesn't seem likely unless we're doing something like we've done in 11.1.7. I would love, after I've done this entire quest, I could go talk to those people that I originally did the requisitions for and hear more about their stories. Oh, you want me to go get this this shipment that you decided to cancel from Ironforge because the roads were too dangerous? Sure. And I go to Ironforge and I get a story in Ironforge, a little local story there, and that sort of stuff. This would have been a great opportunity for that if they wanted to devote the resources to it. But like, I have to say in general, I just loved 11.1.7's main storyline because it was such a pulling from the past to speak to the future, and that made the world feel like things are continuing forward, and I love that.
I think also it's setting up story. I just don't believe the takes that, oh, this is just another story saying everything's fine, we live in a world of peacecraft now. I think it's not setting up immediate story because we know what the immediate story is about to be, but it's setting up story that's definitely on its way, specifically the conflict with the Arathi Empire and some of the elements of the story that we're going to be dealing with that. In fact, now that I think of it, maybe the fact that they specifically talk about the sort of attitude against elves, maybe that was just a reminder to go, remember, there was this side of people, this conflict between human and elves that we've all but forgotten about these days. Just remember that did exist, that in World of Warcraft, humans don't necessarily vibe with elves. They do have some biases against them. Because I think these are going to be part of the topics that we're dealing with as we go into whatever. I imagine the Arathi Empire is something that we maybe will be dealing with in Midnight, potentially. Again, potentially they could even start out as our allies because, coming to fight against Xal'atath and the war. And they've got this prophecy about the war with the darkness. although currently the plan is to stay at home while you send the Halafor expedition to fight in that war, but maybe they change their mind and decide to show up as well anyway.
There could
The one
there
thing
could be.
sorry.
Sorry, I apologize. I did want to say, because you mentioned this, like, this rift between human and elves and what that could mean for the Arathi Empire, and you could even have a caste structure where the more elf blood you have in you, the lower caste you are, and the higher caste are more pure human. Like, I wouldn't have put that in a World of Warcraft story, but having now lived through 11.1.7, it could be possible. And that kind of caste structure isn't something that World of Warcraft has dealt with, but then you could have the lower castes are people that that are downtrodden and people that would help us, while the ruling castes are the true enemies that we have to deal with.
I think you
Would
make
be very interesting.
I think you make a greater, like, that's a really good point, because there's definitely something going on with Farron herself where she is of royal blood. I mean, we know she's from Thoradin's direct line because the Lothars are. And just to reinforce it, they had this story, her new short story, where they talk about her ancestor, who's a forgotten queen. And the person who tells her about it is somebody who tells her, oh, this is a secret book, and it's like a magic book. She can't find the story again. It only appears because the secret keeper opens the secret book and can get the story to appear. So it's like a story that's being kept hidden. It's not a well-known story, and for some reason, like, it's a secret. It's like a protected secret. And the story talks about her ancestor, who is also from Thoradin's line, but who also is an elf. Which I'm a little bit confused about how that works, because when did Thoradin have descendants who lived in Quel'Thalas before they moved to the Empire of Arathor? But anyway, the point is, her Thoradin ancestor is an elf, and they mention that directly, and she obviously has the elf ears that shows her elven heritage. But her family back home, they're not a very noble family. It's been a long time since they've seen a lot of fortune. They have some sort of significant history, but she talks about like dusty history books. So presumably it's a history long since past. And meanwhile, the Emperor himself, his name is Thoradin the Ninth, which suggests he is also from Thoradin's bloodline, or he uses the name, but he's not related to the Lothars, who are definitely from Thoradin's bloodline. So it feels a lot like Farron is supposed to have a claim to the throne that either she doesn't know about, or that she does know. Like, it's just something that's been kept away from her purposefully. Which and her family having this like bad position suggests maybe that's been done on purpose by the Emperor, who doesn't want someone else to come and challenge him for the throne. Her ancestor also, it's both her ancestor and herself have also shown that they've got this connection to the light that the emperors are supposed to have, this special connection where she gets these visions, and you know, it sounds like her ancestor was the first person to get these visions and the sacred flame and everything. And she's got this extremely important relationship with the sacred flame. So yeah, I could definitely see that part of this has been her being kept down, and part of the reason being the very obvious elven heritage that she has. Because again, you can see she's got the elven heritage.
Yeah, it could be that her family, because like family lines can split and have different branches, and so one branch was very much what the culture of the Arathi Empire has become, and so they steered the empire that way. And her branch was more welcoming to different parts of the empire that have now been downcasted. And so when the current branch in power took over, they like defamed and denigrated her branch, and that could be it. Like, she is a royal house, but a house in disregard, a house that is in low regard. That the Emperor's house constantly sees as a threat, doesn't want them to come back into power, sort of thing. Even though ages ago found out that yes, she was the rightful heir, and so they downplay parts of the history that they don't want. So they don't like that story because that's that's one of their ancestors that had too much elf in her. There's like a lot that can be in there, and so like how the Arathi Empire works, what is going to be the stuff that they play up that makes them the bad guys, other than them being against us, and what makes the Arathi of Hollowfall and I assume some Arathi that are going to aid us, the good guys, and how they differentiate that could be a number of things. And I think that, like, if we're taking hints from 11.1.7, it could be a literal blood war.
It'll be interesting to see. Boy, where are we on the time? Because
did we have another topic? Whoops.
We had another topic and we are over time. So we might have to leave 11.2, which I know is way more what everyone's thinking about right now, for next time. I do want to say one thing. Dimensius is a Void Lord. I don't know why someone argued with me about this. Like, what? That was a very strange argument to have.
Well, okay. What's the argument that Dimensius is not a Void Lord? Like, what's the reasoning behind it?
Well, because you get small Void Lords that are actually called Void Lords, that are just little cloudy guys, and that has been part of the confusion, especially the fact that when we meet Dimensius and fight him, he's also like a little cloudy guy. I mean, he's quite a big one, but he's still quite easy to defeat. And that was confusing because he's supposed to be at least as powerful as the Titan. You know, it's supposed to be Sargeras levels of power at the very least, and he clearly was not. But even at the time, as people can see with lore walking now, they were like, something's off here. Something's not right. We're not even sure if that was him or if he's dead or anything. We just know, you know, this was the physical presence that we had to fight. But someone was trying to tell me that Dimensius was never one of the big Void Lords, because the one we met in Battle for Azeroth, in Burning Crusade, was but a fragment or a shadow, which is what Xal'atath says, which is true. We met a fragment or a shadow of Dimensius, but that's because we met a shadow of the Void Lord Dimensius. Like the actual, if we met him in real life, which we will coming up in the next expansion, he's the size of apparently Stormwind City. He's a giant boss. So he is a Void Lord with a capital V and a capital L, after all, as I said. But yeah, that is where the confusion came in. And I think I do understand why people were confused. Because again, Xal'atath pretty much said he's not a Void Lord. But what she meant was the one we faced in Burning Crusade wasn't.
Yeah, that's easy enough to be like, Dimensius in his full form, in his entirety, is a Void Lord. Just like Sargeras is a fallen Titan. The avatar of Sargeras isn't Sargeras,
exactly.
But it is still something of Sargeras.
Still powerful,
and so
still dangerous, but not Sargeras himself.
Yeah. Right? Just a fragment that was still overwhelmingly strong for us at that time, but not the full force of that entity. Yeah,
exactly.
That's what I think.
Well, I'm afraid I need to go, but this was really good. We'll have to get more into Xal'atath and Dimensius and all of that next time.
Yes. I will harass you, and maybe we can get a episode in next week because we've got a lot to talk about. But
Well-
it will depend on our schedules. I'm not promising anything, guys.
We will have to see. We'll have to see how my next week's video goes, but maybe. All right. But for now, where can people find you?
So I can be found on my other podcast for Azeroth or all over the internet. Find everything I do at TruVillainManny. That's true without the E. And where can people find you, including this new video you're working on?
Well, you can find me right here on YouTube. I'm going to have a video coming out in about 10 minutes. I keep telling people they can find me on Twitch. I haven't streamed for a while, but that is because I'm having trouble with my software. I will get things up and running, hopefully this coming week, but we will see. Otherwise, you see me here. I have a new video out every Friday, and we have a podcast either every second Friday, or maybe this time we'll do one next week again.